real 30-second warning. All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the November 19th, 2025 East Lansing Planning Commission meeting. Mr. Bartley, would you please take roll?
I will. Commissioner Chapin.
Here.
Commissioner Denault.
Here.
Commissioner Hendricks.
Here.
Commissioner Lapine. Commissioner Overby.
Here.
Commissioner Putz.
Here.
Commissioner Savolewski. Savolewski, that was a here.
I think he's here.
He's here. And Vice Chair Wagner.
Here.
Chair Sullivan.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you. All right, that takes us to an approval of tonight's agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved. Seconded.
Moved by Commissioner Overby, seconded by Vice Chair Wagner. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Agenda approved. Up next is approval of the minutes from the October 8th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved by Commissioner Denault, seconded by Commissioner Putz. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Takes us on to item number 2, committee reports. Mr. Bartley, I didn't see age-friendly or community development block grant on there, so.
Yes, I forgot to add the individual committees, but my understanding is that actually I don't have the next meeting for the CD advisor group, so perhaps Commissioner Putz does. But as far as the age-friendly committee or age-friendly communities committee, their next meeting is tomorrow, the November 20th. We expect the committee to hear from Commissioner Chapin, who has been working with ELPS on some questions about the high school track. We also expect the group to formally adopt their age-friendly work plan. They've been updating that. The last one was adopted in 2020. And so I expect them to be sending it to council next, and we'll have that for you to review at your next meeting. I'll also be asking members of that committee to be reporting to their individual boards and commissions, so you might hear from Commissioner Chapin about that work plan at the next meeting as well. And then the Age Alive group at MSU has their Town Gown series. The next one is noon this Friday, November 21st at People's Church, and that is about MSU's relationship to Vietnam, especially during the Vietnam War. As far as the Comprehensive Plan Committee, we held debriefs for the committee on October 15th and October 28th. Both of those meetings were fairly, I would say, lightly attended, but the group that was there had a really good conversation at both meetings. The intent was to sort of understand what the experience was for that coordinating committee over the course of the comp plan process. I'll talk about it a little bit tonight in our retreat, but and we got some good feedback and good ideas about how to improve things next round. And then as far as Green Code Committee, that group hasn't met since the last time, which was before your last meeting. There are recommendations that we'll be bringing to council for discussion at their December 16th discussion-only meeting. So following that meeting, we expect to get some guidance as far as which amendments we might want to bring forth first, as far as code amendments to make it more, make our code more green. So I'll have more to report possibly at your December meeting. I think that wraps it up for my committee reports. Commissioner Putz, you're on the CD advisor group. I couldn't recall when the next meeting of that is.
Next one is December 11th.
December 11th. Okay, so that's the report for that.
That's the next one they invited me to, anyways.
Perfect. So Commissioner Putz will be at that, at the CD advisor board at the next meeting, which is on December 11th. Any questions about any of the committees?
Questions for city staff? All right, we'll keep it with you for the staff report.
Sure thing. For staff report, council met last night. There was relatively little business transacted, a decent amount of public hearings, or public comments, excuse me. New council members, Grigsby and Whalen, were sworn in. Councilmember Altman was elected mayor, and Councilmember Grigsby was elected as mayor pro tem. So We don't know if the liaisons will be changing. Our current liaison, as you know, is Councilmember Meadows. He wasn't able to be here tonight. My understanding is that he intends to stay on, but we should have liaison appointments at the next meeting on December 9th. Our planning staff, the planners, went to the Michigan Association of Planners statewide planning conference in October 22nd to 24th. Great conference, really good stuff, a lot of good sessions, a lot of ideas for us to bring back and hope to implement someday. So we'll work on that and have more for you in the future. The Michigan Association of Planning will be hosting their student conference and their transportation conference, both in February of 2026 and both right here in East Lansing. We're also excited because in April, the American Planning Association will be hosting their National Planning Conference in Detroit. And I'll bring that up for this group again in the future because we do have budget to have at least one planning commissioner attend that conference if you're interested. So there have been questions about the sheets proposal that you saw at your last meeting in October. They did not come back as intended the following meeting because they were updating their traffic study as requested by this commission to take place while school was in session essentially, and while the Marathon gas station at the southeast corner, this sheets is proposed at the northeast corner of Abbott and Saginaw, so that the Marathon station is now open, and I believe Sheets has been updating their report, and we'll have that.
They did their traffic study yesterday.
Okay, so they did their traffic study yesterday, and they'll be coming back to the Planning Commission in December with those results and for the continuation of that discussion and potential vote. And then finally, Commissioner Chapin had just asked me about this before the meeting. You may know that in the Trowbridge Business Association, and I should mention the Trowbridge Business Association has been doing strategic planning and also has development concepts that are being developed by a MSU class. Those concepts will be presented by the class at MSU Libraries on December 4th. So if anyone's interested in attending those, please let me know. I can get you the details. But what Commissioner Chapin asked about was Dairy Queen, because he's a big fan. There was a former Wendy's building with a drive-through that was then Paparotti and is now a Dairy Queen down there in Trowbridge Plaza. And the question was, hey, they have a drive-through. Should we have seen that as Planning Commission and then ultimately City Council? Just as sort of a reminder, let you know, here's how. Basically, when we have a land use that's continuing or hasn't been abandoned, we would let a new applicant continue that land use. So the drive-through, even though it would be a special use, that would otherwise, if it were a new use, would require Planning Commission consideration, recommendation vote, and then a public hearing and also a vote by council. If it was a new drive-through, we would have required them to do that. Because it hadn't been abandoned, we considered a continuation of a previous use, which is why you didn't see it. So Dairy Queen's open. They have an operational drive-through. Just, I guess, a shout out to them. So,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
answering to Commissioner Chapin's questions. That's it for my staff report.
It's all about the ice cream, fellow commissioners.
It's understandable.
All right.
It's
Okay.
a top priority.
All right.
Any other comments or questions from commissioners? All right, moving right along, takes us on to item number 4, commissioner announcements. This is also your opportunity to disclose any conflicts of interest on items on the agenda. First off, I'll just say thanks to city staff, Landon and Alicia, for the treats over there. It's a nice incentive to get us to stick around to discuss the very awesome comp plan that we'll be deliberating tonight, so. All right, any other commissioner announcements? All right, great. Takes us on to item number 5, communications from citizens. I did not see any written communications in the agenda packet, so verbal from the audience. This is your opportunity to come forward and address the Planning Commission on any items on or off tonight's agenda. Please keep your comments to 5 minutes and identify yourself on a card up there. So, does anybody wish to come forward and talk to us? Seeing none, all right. Takes us on to item number, as we have no public hearings, item 7, unfinished business, item 7.1, review and approval of Planning Commissioners 2026 meeting calendar. Mr. Bartley?
So we brought this draft calendar to you in October for your review. We're looking for a vote tonight to adopt it or to make changes if you need to. The Planning Commission by bylaws, and unless there are exceptions, typically meets on the second and fourth Wednesdays, 6:30 p.m. And we're proposing to continue that for 2026. I don't believe with any exceptions. So we have the meeting date and submission deadlines in your packet there. Following the second and fourth Wednesdays schedule, I guess if there are any questions or changes that need to be made, I would ask for a motion to change the calendar if needed, and also a motion to adopt it if that's your pleasure.
Okay. Any comments or recommendations? Okay. The only one on here I would note is that March 25th date. Looks like East Lansing Public Schools spring break essentially starts the day after. That one might be tough, but I don't have a strong opinion on it, just pointing it out. I will likely not be able to attend the July 23rd or August 12th meetings due to work conflicts. Also pointing that out, but not recommending to change it, just for me. Any other conflicts or?
Just as a comment, if I may.
Yeah, please.
I'm having shoulder surgery on January 29th, so I'll be here on the 28th for a send-off.
The last hurrah.
Yes, yes. And I'm hoping that I will be recovered enough and able to get out enough on February 11th to come to that meeting.
Okay.
Good luck with everything.
Yeah.
Hope it goes well.
Thank you.
We hope you'll be here, so.
I do too. I may be one-armed, but I'll be here.
As long as you can vote.
Yes, I can raise my hand.
Chuck, let me know if you need a ride.
Okay, I will. Thank you, Ed.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
I have several conflicts in September and October, but, similar to, that we don't need to change it for one person.
Agreed.
Yeah, right.
Leanne, does this require a motion?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right, is there a motion?
I'll move, so moved,
Moved by Commissioner
to
Chapin.
adopt, yep, as presented.
Okay.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Overby. Seeing no more discussion, all those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We have our agenda for 2026. All right, that takes us on to new business. Up first is item 8.1, assignment of a planning commissioner as an alternate member of the zoning board of appeals. Landon, I was hoping you could provide an explanation of their function and their meeting frequency and that sort of thing.
Sure. So our city zoning ordinance allows for a member of the planning commission to act as an alternate member of the zoning board of appeals. And we do have the current alternate, one of the alternates. There are two alternate positions, and one is typically a city council liaison to that group, and another one is a citizen. The citizen's term is ending, and we're interested in the possibility. It's a best practice, I should say, to have a member of the planning commission also be either on or as an alternate to a member of the zoning board of appeals. So we're interested in doing that. The terms are 3 years. It would begin at the beginning of the 2026 calendar year. The ZBA typically sees variance requests for dimensional variances. We don't have a use variance process in the city, so typically reviews and decides upon dimensional variance requests. A variance very quickly is essentially saying, for some reason related to the property that is not in my control, I cannot comply with these requirements of the zoning ordinance. I need relief from the zoning ordinance requirements. And when it's that case, the zoning board of appeals is there to consider and potentially grant that variance. So that's typically, I would say that's the most common item that the zoning board reviews or does as part of their role. They interpret the zoning ordinance, they classify new land uses into zoning categories, consider appeals of a staff or a planning commission decision if that's the case. And generally, an alternate member is there to meet quorum if quorum can't be met, and then stays with the case until it's decided if it takes more than one meeting to decide the case. Currently, the ZBA meets at 6 p.m. on the first Wednesday of each month. It's scheduled to meet monthly. In 2025, it met 4 times. Is that accurate?
We're gonna have one
Okay, so there'll be a fifth one coming up next month. But basically to say that it's not a sure thing that you'll have every Wednesday, first Wednesday evening taken up by ZBA, but we would request that if there is a member that's interested to be an alternate, that they would mark those off on their calendar. So we're interested, if planning commissioners have interest in being an alternate member to the ZBA and could make that commitment, we'd be very interested to have a member appointed. Any questions or interested members?
I have a
Question from
I have
Commissioner
a
Overby.
question, Landon. So we don't have an alternate to step in. So why does the zoning board of appeals need an alternate to step in? And do they have to have a quorum? And if anyone is absent, do they not have a quorum?
Yeah, basically the ZBA is a quasi-judicial body, so it has some different requirements under state law than the Planning Commission does, and quorum is a little more important when it comes to decisions and continuing decisions if they last more than one meeting. So that's why generally there are alternates that are included as by ordinance.
Right. So they're more important than we are.
They're more important for what they do than you are, but you're more important for what you do than they are.
Thank you.
So,
All right, any other questions from commissioners? Anybody interested in serving as an alternate on the ZBA? I could do it, if nobody else is interested.
sure.
I'd be-
You want to be interested?
I want-
I nominate Vice Chair Wagner.
Ah,
I will second that nomination.
Okay. Yeah. First Wednesday.
6 PM.
Okay. Anyone else interested?
Well, just as a comment, I am interested, but I've made an application to be on the city's financial review committee. And I haven't heard any decision on that yet or not. And my concern would be overbooking myself if I did this in addition to that committee. If it turns out that committee doesn't, if I'm not appointed to that committee, I would be glad to do this. But that's not a decision I can make tonight.
Yeah. And just as a point to Mr. Overby's comments, Commissioner Overby's comments, that generally no one is by code, people can't serve on more than one commission at a time, except for where there are specific carve-outs, such as this one. Committees, there's a question as far as whether an appointed committee that's appointed by council essentially also has that prohibition. But most committees that are convened sort of ad hoc committees by groups such as this, such as the Green Code Study Committee or the Comp Plan Coordinating Committee or the Mass Timber Committee last year, as an example, would not have that same kind of prohibition. But the one that Commissioner Overby mentioned, we're still waiting on an answer to determine whether or not that Financial Health Review Committee can be served on. But in this case with the ZBA, you would be doing both, where you would be on the Planning Commission and also appointed as the alternate on the ZBA.
Any other comments or questions?
So let's
I
say.
nominated Vice Chair
Yeah,
Wagner.
I'm really happy to support Vice Chair Wagner for this position. I think that'd be great, yeah.
Okay.
And do we have a motion and a second? I'm
I
not,
don't think we don't need to make a motion.
If you accept the nomination,
Yeah, if you accept
Okay.
it.
you would be.
all right.
Wait, if I don't accept it, do we have to?
You can override five.
Hostile veto, hostile appointment.
I accept things.
Okay.
It is
Thanks,
done.
Ed.
Vice
Thank
Chair
you.
Wagner shall
Good job.
serve as
Thank
an
you.
alternate on the ZBA, so.
I do have a question. When is the December meeting? Am I expected to go to that?
No, you wouldn't be appointed until December 9th,
Okay, great.
and you don't have to go to that meeting either. The first meeting, January 7th.
Well, and you only have to go if you're needed. Is that
Correct.
right?
Correct. In our experience, the alternates usually show up regardless. But really, it is meant to just meet quorum if needed.
Right.
And do alternates vote if they show up? I mean, do they only
If they're
vote?
acting on the board at that time. So if there's a full quorum without them, no, they wouldn't. But if they're sitting on the board acting as a member, then they would, yes.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions or comments?
That's it.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
All right, on to 8.2, our commission retreat on the comprehensive plan deep dive. So, Mr. Bartley,
The deep
I know you've been
dive.
waiting patiently for this.
I've been waiting. Okay, let me share my screen real quick. Okay. So we had a lot of, there were a lot of ideas about what we should do tonight for this retreat, but essentially the Planning Commission, after adopting this document in August, there was a couple questions from commissioners saying, hey, this was great, we read it, and I'm not concerned about that, but I am concerned about sort of making sure that we have sort of a full understanding. And so I wanted to go through the document, sort of highlights of the document tonight. I don't want to take a super long time. I do have 40 slides, but I won't go through 40 slides very slowly, I promise. But I just wanted us to have an opportunity to sort of look at some points and discuss them. Essentially, we'll have a facilitated discussion, but mostly it's going to be me presenting, and then you have questions or comments or thoughts, please feel free to share. Mr. Chair, you mentioned the snacks. We have snacks. We brought Cheez-Its, so if you do get Cheez-Its, please stay very close to your microphone so you can crunch right in the mic. That's important. All right, so with that, I guess I'll just get started. The bigger picture and focus, and I do have a couple of, I'm trying to make my slideshow move forward. 1 second, please.
So Landon, just to clarify,
Yes.
do you want us to sort of engage as you go through, or do you want to wait until the end, or there's some spots that are more convenient?
Engage as we
for-
go through.
Okay.
If it starts to become an in-depth conversation, I feel like we should hold off and
Okay,
keep going, I'll tell you, but otherwise, please do.
okay.
As you know, I'm going to get right into it. We sort of the earliest outcome of our early community engagement was, what are our top priorities here? And that was mostly from the Winterfest activity, which was in December 2023, some conversations at the Planning Commission level, conversations with staff and with City Council. And so we found, but mostly these 4 priority items were basically reflected what we heard from Winterfest, which was very well attended. I felt quite confident in the results of our activities at that event, that this is what came to the top. Social equity was the #1 priority of folks at the Winterfest event, and also from conversations outside of that event. Housing, public health, and climate resilience came up close third, I guess second, third, and fourth. But social equity was the overarching highest priority. So we determined that the best way to approach this would be to have sort of topical focus on housing, public health, and climate resilience, and then try to look through at all of those through a lens of social equity. So to start with, I'm just going to give a brief overview of social equity, how we see it in the comprehensive plan, and we'll keep moving. I like to show this graphic as a good way to show sort of what we mean as far as equity, because equity and equality get mixed up quite a bit. Essentially, so what we have here is this bent tree, and in the hypothetical bent tree, the lower side has more fruit. So you have 2 children. The one on the shorter side of the tree is looking up and saying, hey, I can get fruit easier because the tree is bent towards me. So that's essentially inequality. The one person has more resources because the playing field is tilted towards them. And consider that in whatever societal framework you want to. Essentially, equality is saying, okay, the kids are both having trouble reaching the tree. Let's give them the same size ladder. So they both get the same size ladder. And as you can see, the child on the shorter side of the tree can easily reach up and get the fruit. The child on the other side of the tree is still having trouble because, again, the playing field is tilted away. The system is not favoring that child on the right. So equity says, okay, let's recognize the inequities of the system. Let's recognize that the tree is tilted, and give resources accordingly. So they've given the child on the right a taller ladder so that now they can reach the tree, as well as the child on the left, which can reach the tree with a shorter ladder. Excuse me. And then justice is essentially just saying, let's fix the tree so it's not tilted. So the idea with equity is that you're redistributing resources and sort of energy and whatever those resources might be. You're redistributing them towards people who don't otherwise have access because the system is essentially biased against them. And again, how you want to approach this and how you want to consider how does this play out in different areas of East Lansing and our society is up to you. But this was the lens we're looking at, is how do we make sure that those who haven't had the resources are going to get them. And so what we did is we took a hard look at what are some equitable elements, and I wanted to shout out to the DEI department here at the city, because they were really helpful with this part, and all the parts, but this part especially. So we said, okay, what's our equity element here? How do we assess community needs through data collection and stakeholder engagement, for example, and how are we going to do that with this process? So for example, for that element, we said, okay, we want to have significant data collection. We want to engage residents a lot, early and often, through monthly activities, wide-ranging and diverse coordinating committee. So that was sort of our best guess there. We wanted to identify systemic barriers that contribute. What makes that tree tilt, right? And we sort of sought to identify those inequities through this process. We noticed some, they're in the plan, we'll talk about them, but we think these are going to become more visible during implementation. We want to make sure that we're engaging with marginalized groups that might not otherwise show up or might not be at the table. And so we sought to identify who are those people. Can they make it to a meeting? If they can't, can we get meaningful representation for that group? So we saw things like this with the Capital Area Housing Partnership, for example, for the Michigan Disabilities Council. There were a couple other groups that were represented on the committee because they might have had otherwise a more difficult time participating in the process. Development of policies that prioritize marginalized groups. So trying to address these historical injustices is sort of a key consideration mostly during implementation. How we implement this plan is going to be very important, and the methods we use are going to be where we can really have some impact as far as equity goes. This is kind of the theme, I guess, among this when we're looking at equity. How do we collaborate? How do we make sure that we have inclusive solutions? And that's part of the key reason why we convened a coordinating committee that was pretty big, pretty diverse, and making sure that there was coordination among a wide range of stakeholders in the community. We want to make sure that we have equitable economic development practices. That's going to be up to the economic development team in their implementation of these, but also continuing to have collaboration with all our city's departments and divisions, including DEI, and with the other agencies, such as LEAP, which is the Lansing Economic Area Partnership, and other groups that were on the committee, like Capital Area Housing, for example. And then focusing on getting good quality housing at an attainable price point, right? That was a big one that kept coming up throughout the comp plan process, is how do we make housing affordable, because that's a major issue. I can say we're seeing an increased incidence of unhoused in the city, for example. Homelessness is a housing market issue. So how can we change the housing market or incentivize changes within the market to get housing to be more affordable? We have a lot of groups working on this too, but this is central in the plan. So that was where we started with the social equity lens, right? We're trying to look through at all the different topics and all our activities and our implementation steps through a lens of equity, and determining how can we make these implementation steps equitable. A lot of the work here has not been done. The comprehensive plan is the easy part, in my opinion. We're saying, hey, what do we want? Here are some ideas of how to get there. But actually getting there and actually doing the implementation is when we really have to focus on this. What are we doing right now, and how do we make sure it's equitable? So we'll continue to work on that. This was a plan update, right? It wasn't a replacement, and that was a discussion early on with this group in late 2023. So we have a chapter in there, or a couple pages, I guess, saying, hey, what's new and what's old? Essentially, the demographics are new. We updated things since 2018 when the last plan was adopted, but you should still compare. In this presentation, I'm going to go through a few of those data points, and I've combined them when I could to show sort of the whole range of demographic data. Vision and goals are still there from the first plan, except for when it comes to our focus areas, specifically in social equity and housing and public health and climate resilience. So we have new vision and goals in that sense. We did not update the future land use map as part of this planning process. That's an implementation step, and we'll get to that I'll talk about that more. We did update the zoning plan. Just kind of took a fresh look at it. The zoning plan is essentially saying, how do our zone districts correspond to comprehensive plan use designations, land use categories? Housing was a focus area of the first plan, or excuse me, the 2018 plan, but it's a much bigger priority for this plan. So again, this table is essentially saying which document should you rely on. But public health, sustainability, and social equity were not parts of the 2018 plan. So those are real focus areas for this one. So if there are questions or people want to understand, hey, what are we going to do as far as those topic areas, they should use the 2025 plan.
Can you repeat that word too, social equity, and what was the other?
Social equity, public health, and
And public
sustainability
health.
or climate resilience. Because those,
7:06 for the minutes.
Commissioner Lapine at 7:06, thank you. So essentially, those three topic areas weren't really focus areas in the 2018 plan. They were, and part of the reason why they were was because they weren't a focus area in the 2018 plan. So in 2025, we wanted to make those a bigger priority. Other key themes, there were other themes from the 2018 plan that aren't really talked about here. I just want to mention that the student engagement report, that the student engagement happened in January to April of 2024. And that included some other key themes in addition to housing and public health and sustainability or climate resilience. It also included focus on the business districts and also transportation. So as far as community engagement goes, I just kind of wanted to lay out a little bit of what we did. On the top, you have the committee work, the coordinating committee, which was convened back in early 2024, started meeting a couple months later and met all the way through to last month. You can see a couple gaps there when we had breaks while we were finishing up community engagement, and then when we were writing the document, and then when we were in the public review period. So the committee is finished. Did a great job. We were very happy. We still got to figure out how to give you guys to say thank you, so we'll work on that. But the bottom of this timeline shows our community engagement activities. So all those little arrows, especially between the two bars, the bar on the left says on-campus student engagement. That was sort of the several different meetings. I'll show that in a second. We started with public workshops during that time. We had a Dream Play Build in April. Then we had another workshop in May, June, July, August, September, October. So we just kept going on through. With those focus areas. And then, again, there's a little gap there between at the end of 2024 into early 2025 when we were writing the document. And then you can see the public review period, council review, this planning commission reviewing it several times, a couple of public open houses, and then finally the adoption at the end of, or in the middle of August. So any questions about what's on this timeline? I know you can't read it, but there was a lot. Then I just wanted to show too that the students, the work that they did, they had 13 separate workshops in the few short months that they were working on this. They had 35 hours of engagement, almost 500 students that took part. And that was their goal, is make it a significant number, and it was. Had 160 responses to their online surveys. Total participants in their sticky note workshops were 241. It was a really good, very impressive student engagement work, in my opinion, for a lot of work in a fairly short time that had a pretty good sized impact on this plan. Any questions about the community engagement part before we move on?
I'll just make a comment. This is the first time that I saw the student engagement report. Maybe if I missed it earlier, I missed it, but as I reviewed for tonight, it's the first time I'd seen that in its entirety. And I was impressed, first of all, by the quality of the report. And I think they exceeded their target. They wanted a little less than 500, but they received input from 500 people. But I was impressed because the students, there was a lot of alignment with what the community said, especially around affordable housing, better food options, healthier food options was a theme. And there were a couple others, but I was impressed that their findings had a lot of similarity to what our community, our non-student community, if you will. But anyway, thumbs up to that group, when they presented here, and to see it included in the plan is good stuff. I think we just need to acknowledge that.
Yeah, And we did make it an appendix to the plan, so it is included in the full document finally.
Yeah, it is,
finally.
yeah.
And that, it wasn't in the original plan document that you guys looked at.
So I didn't
so we-
miss it.
Correct.
Okay, good.
And we have a couple printed copies of both these plans up on the
Yeah.
front, right in front of Vice Chair
Okay.
Wagner, including of the 2018 plan, if you want to review that. So thank you for those comments. Any
Yeah.
other comments or questions before I move on? Okay. So we really, and early on, we had a lot of comments, especially from people on the commissions, council, and at the early event saying, hey, make this all about data. We really want to make sure that you have a good basis for data before you start your ideas. You want to have a good, clear picture of what East Lansing is like right now. So here are a few key data points, basically the median age in East Lansing, and this is mostly 2022 census data, 21.4 years old. The state average is 40.3 years old. So and you can see the demographic curve, or curves just down below that. So the city of East Lansing on the left has between 18 and 24 years, big bulge. We have a lot of people in those age ranges in the city versus the state of Michigan, which is a much different profile, and that's just to the right. So it shouldn't be any big surprise, I think, to anyone who's been in East Lansing for more than a minute, but we have a lot of students, which is not unusual for a college town. As far as the ratio of sexes in East Lansing, between female and male at least, we have a little bit higher female population than male. The numbers aren't quite adding up here, as I'm noticing, but that's just because there are fractions that aren't accounted for. Population projections, just before 2020, the student population at Michigan State University exceeded the total population of the city, and we see the overall population continuing to grow over the next several years, but probably not much past 50,000 until 2030, and then maybe up to 56,000 about 20 years from now. And then finally, so we've seen over the last 80 years before 2020, we saw a 0.6% growth rate of the city, which is about 292, almost 300 new residents every year. But we're seeing about 239 new housing units per year. But that was on a different time scale, just to point that out. The almost 300 new residents are from 1960 to 2020. The number of new housing units, about 240, is from 2010 until 2024. Any questions about this slide before we keep going?
Actually, I don't want to talk too much here, but I'm going to jump in. You've asked. So there was one piece in the report that I was a little concerned about because it projected between now and 2050, I think, an additional 8,000 students. I'm sorry, an additional population, not enrollment, Dave. A population increase of 8,000 people. But there was also a line in here that said it got flat beginning in 1970, but that 8,000 projection was based on something prior to 1970. I don't think the population is going to enroll quite as much as we project here because it flatlined in 1970, according to what we have here. The other thing I'm concerned about, and we had a presenter talking about the Howard and some proposal down there, and they were big on this significant increase in student enrollment at Michigan State. I'm not sure I'm convinced that's going to happen at the rate that they projected, so I just want to make sure I sort of throw that into the mix. I think to project a continuation of an increase, not only in population, but also in student enrollment, I think we have to be a little careful about that. That's all I'm suggesting.
I can tell you that, the 1970, when it started to flatten, then decrease or decline in the 80s, was certainly taken into consideration. But the trend that we've seen since that, at least since 90s, is
All right.
continual increase.
So that's how you got to 8,000.
Correct.
Okay.
That
Post
said, though,
1970.
sure. I
Okay.
would say that
All right.
mostly post in the 21st century
Okay.
is when we've seen
Okay.
more growth.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Just to note on that, we have obviously a cap on what capacity we have for residents to increase in the city. So it largely depends on what the development trends are over the next few decades and whether or not we build additional housing for people, for that population to possibly be able to creep up depending on what
Yeah.
the university does with adding dorms or student housing there, but
Sure.
it's largely dependent on the planning future for the community.
And this is our best guess based on is trends. You don't know what's going to happen until it's happened. So this is our best guess.
I'm not making a strong case one way or the other, I'm just sort of lodging.
Oh, sure.
That's a good point.
A question, a concern, that's all, so.
As far as racial composition, on the right, you see our current racial composition, at least as far as 2022. The largest, about 75.3, is white. 9.2% is black or African American. Excuse me, that's Asian alone. Asian. 7.4% is black or African American. And I'm going to have trouble with the rest, but essentially you can see that, and that's just my eyes. 75% is white in the city, and then we have a smattering of 25% of others. Where this makes a difference is that to the left you can see the change in racial composition. So trends in the last 20 years, since 2000 to 2020, we've seen the white population decrease slightly, down by 14%. Black or African American increase by 62%, as well as Hispanic or Latino, 92% increase. Multiracial of two or more races, 65%. A slight increase of 7% for Asian alone, a slight decrease from American Indian and Alaska Native, no change for Native Hawaiian or Pacific, and then a decrease in other. So that just should give you a little bit of context, and then 13% of our residents were born outside of the United States. As far as income inequities, we've noticed that between 2010 and 2020, median household income increased the greatest for people identifying as Asian, increased significantly. It decreased the most for people identifying as American Indian or Alaskan Native in those 10 years, between 2010 and 2020. And then we found that the median household income of Black, Indigenous, and other households of color, BIPOC, was 42% lower than white households in 2022. So we have some income inequities in the community. Our median family income was $121,000 in 2022, which is higher than the state median. And I'll talk about that as well in a couple slides, except that BIPOC families earn on average $30,000 less than white families. So should give you some context on race and income in the city. Bless you. Let's see, moving on. This is directly out of the student engagement report. I thought it was a good look at the houses or housing. The median home value increased between 2000 and 2010, and then started to flatten around 200,000 in the city of East Lansing, versus Ingham County, which is just below that, the lower line on the graph, and Meridian Township, which is just above that. So we've seen an increase and then sort of flattening of home values approaching 2020. Gross rents for the same three, East Lansing, Meridian Township, and Ingham County, also increased significantly across all three of those between 2000 and 2020. The most increase was for the city of East Lansing. And then as far as the renting versus owning in the city, we have a higher proportion of renters than we do owners than the comparable areas. So the 2022 data showed about 55% renter to 45% owner. My understanding is that current data is closer to 60%, 60 to 40. Whereas we're seeing the opposite of that in Meridian Township, 65% ownership, and in Ingham County as an average 64% ownership. So we have a higher number of renters than we do owners in the city, which again is not uncommon for a college town. These charts show a little bit about our income and changes in income. So the 2022 data is right in the middle on the left side. I have these little houses and people standing on coins. The 2022 are the center two. So the median household income, the top is 2014 and the second row is 2020. I'm trying to understand what my 2018 is right there. But the second row is 2022 data. So you can see that median household income increased across the board in East Lansing, in Michigan, and in the United States as a whole. It increased about $11,000 per household. In East Lansing, it increased about $17,000 in Michigan, and it increased about $19,000 in the United States. So we saw a little bit less of an increase in East Lansing than in Michigan and the United States as a whole. As far as median family income, so that's separated from like an individual or two people who might live in a household, median family income also increased over the same time period. So 2014 is all the way at the bottom, and then 2022 data is just above that. We see an increase from 88,000 to 121,000 in East Lansing, from 61,000 to 85,000 in Michigan, and from 65,000 to 92,000 in the United States as a whole. And then finally, our household type, sort of non-family housing versus family housing, we see increasing for non-family housing since 1990, but a slight decrease from 2010 to 2022. And then essentially the opposite for family housing, a decrease from 1990 to 2010 and a slight increase in 2022. And then just showing the home ownership versus rentership again, 2022 data is about 60% to 40% rentals to owned houses. Any questions about this before we move on? I'm trying to balance between talking too fast and stumbling over my words and not making this a 4-hour presentation, so.
You're doing great.
You're
Thank you,
doing
thank you.
great, yeah.
As far as change in household size itself, this is over from 1990 to 2020. So you can see ownership has been essentially, as far as owned properties, the size of the owned properties, the number of people in those houses, the average has gone down from 1990 to 2010, went from 2.6 average people in a household to 2.3, and then started kicking back up into 2020 up to about 2.5 people per household for owned households. For rented households, it's been a little bit lower. It started sort of dropping from 1990 to 2000. 2000, it stayed about the same at 2.15, et cetera, between 2000 and 2010. This is for rented households. And then it dropped to 2020 to just over 2 people per household. That's again in rented households, and I might just mention that we have a cap in East Lansing that up to 2 unrelated individuals can live in a rented household. So that might be part of why we're seeing that level of 2. And then as far as new housing units, you can see that there were a lot of new housing units. New essentially is the darker color, and the running total is lighter color. We've seen significant new housing units in 2018, a few more in 2020, excuse me, 2020 and 2021, but very little as far as new housing units since then or before 2017. And then just sort of the type that's been constructed. Between 2014 and 2024, we saw a lot of these units were in high-rise fraternity, sorority, or assisted living, and fewer were in multifamily or single-family.
I had a question.
Yes.
Is that just random that the Fire 4 happened to be consistent or in number as it was growing, or I mean, was that planned or just kind of?
So the FAR 4 on the chart showing, yeah. So because there was relatively little new housing construction over those years, 2021, 22, 23, 24. The higher part of the graph is showing just sort of the running total. So since there were very few built, those are going to stay about the same.
It's kind of static then, it wasn't?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that connects to my point earlier about, we're projecting an increase in population, but there's just not evidence here that it's going to take place. I don't want to beat a dead horse, I'm sorry. But there's too much in here that raises questions in my mind about projecting growth.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a good thing, bad thing. I just don't want us to make plans projecting in a way that may indeed be inaccurate.
I might just counter a little bit to
Okay,
say,
good. I like that.
if new housing units weren't constructed, it may not necessarily be because there wasn't a market. It may be because they weren't approved. So
Okay.
there may have been
Okay.
proposals that didn't get through and therefore new units weren't
Okay.
constructed. There may have been a demand, maybe not, I'm not sure.
Okay,
But where there was, say, a demand and not a supply to meet that demand, we see other communities building more residential nearby.
this is the beauty of conversation
It's
and
excellent. That
having
was
a
a great
moment
point.
like this, so.
In Langdon, one of my favorite components of this plan is how each section has a short, mid, and long-term action item. And I think that's contemplated essentially with, we expect a population trend based on the analysis we've seen and what data we have available to increase by X. And then you can look at some of these short-term action items, which are essentially like planning for that potential population increase by adding additional housing to compensate for it or making other adjustments based on the goals of the master plan. So I think a lot of it requires us to do all three of those things in tandem, or we're doing the short-term things that are kind of the low-hanging fruit or the quick action items we can do, and then planning for potential outcomes to make sure that the community is prepared and achieving the goals that they set out to according to this plan.
Excuse me.
Or that's how I see it anyways.
No, that's good. I'm going to move on real quick to a little bit more about work and commuting. Basically, what this little teeter-totter at the top shows is 1.39 is the ratio of jobs to housing. So we have about 1.4 times as many jobs in the city of East Lansing as we do housing. So there is a net in-migration happening from outside of the city, of people who are living outside of the city, coming in every day because they don't live in the city. That could be for all kinds of reasons. But the number at the top, 2018, showing 1.25, that was the number from the 2018 comprehensive plan. So there has been an increase in the I guess, a widening disparity where there are continue to be more jobs compared to housing in the city. There were fewer jobs compared to housing in 2018. There were 1.25 times as many. Now there are about 1.4 times as many jobs as housing. It's 7 years later. Any questions on that? And then the bottom two just show examples of what it looked like otherwise. But yes, sir.
Not really a question, just more of a comment on, one kind of tying into this and to the housing question was, if you look at back on page like 39 of the PDF, we notice there's only 5 groceries in East, grocery businesses in East Lansing. And I don't know about out the rest of the commissioners, but last time I was in the Target on Grand River, I wouldn't exactly plan a week worth of groceries out of there. So you have to think about some of those food deserts that may or may not be appearing on the map too, because if we want more people to be able to live in East Lansing, there has to be more access to food, and it can't just be, and not necessarily a criticism, but it can't just be convenience store food.
And actually, we'll talk about that a little bit later too.
Sorry, I jumped the gun.
No, it's great. It's great. Excuse me. What I want to show here with commuting methods is that because we have 1.4 times as many jobs as we do housing, we're going to have this net in migration, so we have a decent amount of commuting traffic. By and large, the 54.7% of people in 2022 were commuting by car, truck, van, taxi, or motorcycle. For the most part, that's cars. About 50% of our total commutes are driving alone in a car. This is actually a much larger, for a college town, this is not unusual. For a non-college town, we would have a much larger proportion of driving alone to work, much smaller of walking, transit, biking. Carpooling, you can see a little bit, there's about 5% that are carpooling, and then several are working at home. That's a higher proportion than past years, but 2020 and beyond changed a lot of things. So we kind of called out some historical changes as far as walking, biking, and bus commuting methods to see how those have changed over the last couple of years. We saw essentially walking has gotten a little bit less, although there was a bump I wanted to show in 2014. Between 2000 and 2014, walking was about 22%. It's dropped since then to about just under 20% of people are walking to work. Biking we saw a drop where it went from 4.5% in 90 down to 2000, 3% in 2000, jumped up to 9% in 2014, and has dropped back down to 5% in 2022. And then bus has gone up steadily, was about 3% in 1990, went up to 4% in 2020, or excuse me, 2000, 6% in 2014, and then just below, down to 5.7% in 2022. These are significant mo shares to me, but they're also thrown off by students because a lot of students bike, walk, and bus, although you can argue. And when I was looking at this, when I was putting the presentation together going, they're not counting going to school, but they're counting going to work. But a lot of students have jobs, so this is still counting, but it doesn't reflect their trips to school. Any more questions about this before I move on? Okay. So last couple points here is that I wanted to sort of consider some history. This is one thing that we looked at as well when we were talking about social equity. What you see on the left-hand side is sort of is an excerpt of a redlining map that was created for the Lansing area in the 1930s, I believe. And it showed City of East Lansing. Essentially, the parts that you see off to the left side of that, those are the non-desirable parts, and that's where mortgage brokers would essentially push people they didn't want to have a mortgage in East Lansing to that area. So into Lansing, the darker colors around Bailey and Glencairn, Chesterfield Hills, those are considered more desirable. So essentially, banks would not lend to people that they didn't consider desirable. And what we found over history is those have been people of color. So there is a legacy in East Lansing from 100 years ago that may not be true today, but maybe. So we looked at, did this have impacts? Can we see clear impacts on, say, our median household income by census tract? I would argue not very strong. They're not super strong correlations here. This is also almost 100 years past. But we can see, say, Glencairn has a little bit more money than a higher income than some areas of the city, such as around downtown, Pinecrest, White Hills certainly, but those weren't part of the city at the time of the mortgage or the redlining map that's shown here. We also wanted to look at our zone districts and future land use. Hey, if their future land use somehow tied to some old historical patterns? No, generally not. And we also looked at the zoning map. Generally not seeing too many correlations between how things have been zoned, except that I would say you have these as largely residential areas where they're shown as having mortgages. I would say we don't have a real strong correlation between the redlining map and our current practices. Yes, sir.
One thing I didn't see reflected is all of the university housing out on Harrison and, all around just south of the basketball stadium. And all of that single family, small family, university-sponsored housing is all gone now. And if you drive out on Harrison, that's really, it just seems such a waste to have 1,000 units sitting there empty. Is that caught up in this, in the movement of all those people, obviously north of Grand River? Or is the university just not providing it and people are on their own?
No, university provides housing. They have student housing, they have University Village. I'm not aware of
Not anymore, though. If you drive out there, there's no cars there at all.
Well, they may not be driving, as we saw in the last slide.
No one's living there. It's deserted. South of the railroad tracks on Harrison.
Oh, I'm sorry, Spartan
yeah.
Village, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was gonna say University Village, I live right next there, and I see people there all the time. Spartan Village, absolutely.
Yeah.
Spartan Village is sort of, I think, planned attrition, that they seem to not be moving anyone else in there. There are still some people living there as far as I know, but they're just moving out, and as they move out, they're not replaced. So that Spartan Village, my understanding is that they have plans that seems to be evolving. So we don't, what we haven't seen recently is a proposal for a massive amount of housing. There have been some discussions about more businesses moving in, but we have seen those discussions kind of grind to a halt as the university financial situations changed recently.
It used to be so dense in there. I remember even Cherry Village, or whatever that was called, where
Cherry
the
Lane.
new intramural building is. I used to mow it when I was in college, and it was just full of people and families, and, it just isn't, you don't see that anywhere in East Lansing proper. And I just, it's a huge change. I just didn't see it caught in the plan.
Well, certainly, this plan didn't really focus on the university very much. The university is, although it's part of the city, It's a separate entity. It essentially governs itself. We have a zone district for it, but it's permissive. Whatever the university wants, it does. So as the university has essentially slowly reduced maybe their amount of net amount of housing, yes, there is a need, and there is a change in supply for our demand. But I'd argue that you just have, that just points to a more of a need that we could be approving more housing or in the right forms, and I think it's an opportunity. Because as long as we have a demand, we can choose what kind of housing we want to allow and bring forward. Yes, ma'am.
I also think that, Scott, to your point, and I don't know that it's necessarily reflected in this document, but I do think it's important to call out the history that the university used to own some of the responsibility for housing graduate students and a relatively large population that now they have essentially shifted onto the city of East Lansing to address with an influx of students. But really, they've reduced some of the housing that's available for students on campus and have pushed the onus onto the city without necessarily offering any support to the city to house additional students. And I think that's an important piece to consider in the broader history of housing in East Lansing and the university as a whole. That used to be something that the university took more of an ownership in, particularly for graduate students, that they don't anymore.
I think that's well said, and I think it sort of gets to an area where we really need to have better conversation
Yeah.
with the university
Yeah.
about how we're going to treat the increase or stability in terms of enrollment. You could even go back to the Quonset huts that were in place on campus where the faculty bricks are or were before those were knocked down. Yes, I've observed that going way, way back, and it's certainly a change. And I think your point, Lauren, needs to be, well, you can't lose sight of that. That's really something we just can't lose sight of.
I mean, literally thousands of units
Yeah.
with, you know, a two-bedroom place with probably 4 kids.
Yeah.
And I think it's really telling that several city council candidates, right, brought up this as an issue, right? Housing that's not being used for single families, rather they're being used as rentals because the burden of housing is on the city of East Lansing and rather than the university. So I think to me, it was really telling how many candidates were articulating this as an issue versus just, a year ago.
That's a great segue into our first discussion about focus areas and goals and implementation, because this is a great discussion, but I want to keep moving on. We're going to focus on housing. So the focus areas were housing, public health, and climate resilience, right? Again, all through a social equity lens. The vision and goals didn't change significantly from the previous plan in 2018. But essentially, the major goal that came out of this process was saying, let's expand our housing choices through appropriate and thoughtful density and design. And that was really what it comes down to. And especially as far as what's considered missing middle, which is essentially housing types that you don't see very much. So we have a lot of mid-rise and high-rise apartments, and we have a lot of detached single-family homes, but what about the middle? And we actually have a decent number of duplexes and fourplexes scattered about, but should we allow these more, should we be more permissive for duplexes or fourplexes, townhouses, cottage courts, multiplex, triplex, live works? These were all sort of brought up in the 2018 plan too, but we haven't seen too much change as far as actually sort of allowing them or encouraging them. So what we found that came out of sort of the key themes coming out of the housing part of this section was the large text on top of each sentence is mine, trying to sort of summarize. Limit greenfield development in the northern tier. We found that the city is kind of built out, except for north of Lake Lansing. There is a lot of land, but a lot of that land is wetlands and other environmentally sensitive areas. And we found that our community engagement reflected that, said it's not close enough to transit, it's too far from services, we have to use our cars, we want to keep this undeveloped if we can. So we heard that quite a bit. focused development in already developed areas. Very similar kind of response, saying, hey, if we can fill in these places that are already developed or have been already, we can have more households along transit, we can have more households near goods and services, we can make use of our existing infrastructure, maybe we can make use of our existing buildings. I think people on here have quoted a previous planning commissioner who was quoting somebody saying, the greenest building is the one already built. So that idea is like, hey, if we can reinvest into what we already have instead of building on green fields, we're going to be better off. Excuse me. We saw also the discussion about, hey, let's locate our new housing at a higher density downtown and in denser business districts. And basically this acceptance saying, yeah, we can have more dense, we can have more multifamily housing, but let's keep it in our busier districts already instead of pushing into the neighborhoods. Spartan Village came up, like Commissioner Sobolewski said, the area around Lake Lansing and 127, and Saginaw and 127, and also downtown. And along major corridors, including along Saginaw, Lake Lansing, and Hagedorn. These 3 study areas that I'm showing here are from the 2018 plan, but I wanted to show that, hey, the more things change, the more they stay the same, because you can see North End study area is a discussion about Lake Lansing and 127 by the Meyer, so you're showing some concepts for some infill around Lake Lansing and Coolidge. The Center City study area is additional construction and higher density construction around downtown. And then the South End study area at the left, or excuse me, at the right, shows some ideas for more development along Trowbridge. So at 127 and Trowbridge or near Spartan Village. So we're seeing some similarities from the 2018 plan to the 2025 plan as far as development priority areas. And then just real quick, as far as like sort of select community engagement, this was a reflection of one of our exercises that essentially is showing the sort of bluish and cooler colors are saying higher density housing is better around business districts and like along the major corridors. A lot of people put it around Spartan Village and Trowbridge, several around Michigan Ave, close to Lansing, and then all the way up and down Grand River. But having the lower density stuff, the warmer colors in the neighborhoods. So we saw this sort of, that was just a constant that we saw. Keep density in the business districts, keep it lower in the neighborhoods. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I wanted to sort of point them out, right? Here are some implementation activities, and as the chair mentioned earlier, we have short-term, mid-term, and long-term actions for each one. I highlighted where we have Planning Commission shown as sort of a partner, a champion, and there are a lot of them. So updating the future land use map, I mentioned that that's an implementation step. I want to do that sooner than later, potentially next spring. Review and update the housing needs assessment. Typically our community economic development department has done that. I'm not aware quite yet of their plan to do that, when their next one's going to be, but they do that periodically and regularly. Improving the development process came up quite a bit as far as making it easier to provide housing to meet our needs. And that was essentially just saying, can we modify our development process to take away some of the steps that we're identifying as barriers, or developers are identifying as barriers. So I'll have proposals for that next year. Similarly, zoning updates to increase supply of the housing supply and increase the diversity of housing would also be zoning ordinance changes. The City Council is discussing, and this group discussed, the diverse housing requirement downtown ad nauseum, I might say, but the City Council is currently considering some changes to that, and I think we'll see changes, or at least more discussion starting in January. But that's not just about downtown. This point is saying across the board, let's consider other housing types that we're not seeing very much, like these missing middle housing types that I've talked about, or perhaps accessory dwelling units. These are different housing types that we don't see much of. Let's see them. Let's see how they work in East Lansing, and so we can explore that in the future. Pre-approved housing plans came up. The MEDC actually, based on my old employer, Grand Rapids, has worked on some pre-approved housing plans for missing middle. So you see 2, 4-plex, et cetera, 2, 3, or 4 unit pre-approved plans. So if a developer says, I want to build a 2 unit, if they use that plan, they can build it without having to go through the whole process. So it can make, if we have certain housing types that we want to encourage, we can just pre-approve a plan, and then anyone who takes that plan can just build it, and we can see introduction of what we call gentle density very effectively using those. There was a discussion about the plan for unhoused community members. That's being, I would say, being done right now, actually. With the police, between the police and the Community Economic Development Department, they're working on a task force that's coming up with some ideas really focused on downtown. And I would say somewhat temporary, looking at how do we address our short-term concerns or issues that we're seeing right now. As I mentioned earlier, when it comes down to it, homelessness is a housing market issue. So the items that we're looking at as far as how do we change the whole system, how do we change how we approach housing overall, and allow more and different types of housing, that's going to be what changes this in the long term. But certainly the work is being done for the short term as well. Consider incentives for more attainable housing for new home buyers, for aging in place. I mentioned the age-friendly communities work plan. That's a strongly held value among our senior population is, hey, I want to be able to age in place. I want to be able to stay here and not have to move out of my house necessarily or my neighborhood or into some home. What if I have options here to live where I want to instead of feeling I have to move because of circumstance? So we can certainly change ordinances and policies to address that. Parking needs assessment, we do periodically. We do a parking report annually, but a parking needs assessment is less common, typically every 5 years. The Planning Commission would look at that. We have a downtown parking force or parking task force. I'm not aware of when the next parking needs assessment is going to be done, but I know the last one was, I think we're almost due. So I will hopefully have the next one is? Oh, they already did it. Well, great, there we go. It's been done. I'll have a report for you at the next meeting. There was okay, so moving on then, the
Hey,
discussion of the form-based code.
Can
Sorry?
I just ask a quick parking question?
Yep.
Because I just noticed this the other day, and I probably missed something. Is parking not free on Sunday anymore?
I think it is.
In most of the lots with gates? Did that
I'm not
change?
sure about that.
I just used a garage and it worked.
Okay.
I thought it was.
Because I was at I was surprised, I was on Sunday, the lot behind the Peanut Barrel and like Campbell's. And that one, you still have to pay on Sundays, which I was surprised by.
Privately owned.
Is that privately owned?
Yeah.
That one is?
It's still a city lot.
But part of it's
The land is privately owned,
Yeah.
but I think they lease it to the city, so I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
It might just be that it was full. Sometimes the garages won't open.
Yeah, it wasn't full.
Okay.
I was just curious.
I'll find out about that and let you know.
Okay.
But obviously, I don't think I'm the top person to talk about parking because I didn't realize that parking needs assessment was done. So it is.
for the other one.
I'm sorry?
I just know because we're talking about the other.
Yep, yep. Okay. Form-based code, I know that several on this commission feel strongly about that because you did a lot of work. It's worth revisiting that form-based code. And essentially, a form-based code is one that says the form of the building is more important than the use that's within it. And that certain building forms will be more conducive to certain kind of uses. And so you can put more of your regulatory power, I guess, towards changing the form of a building instead of focusing specifically on the use. So I know that there was an attempt or a lot of work that was done on a form-based code draft that wasn't ultimately adopted. And that this was brought up as a priority item to bring it back, and we'll certainly be talking about that. And then redeveloping underutilized public buildings. We've been talking about that. City Council and City Manager's Office has been talking about that right now and for the last couple of years. And then I just want to mention a recommendation from the student report that is to incorporate more inclusive zoning language. They specifically wanted to see more diverse housing options, focus on accessory dwelling units. That was a big focus for them. They're also very interested in community benefits agreements, although those aren't necessarily as related to housing. But essentially that's just saying that a developer will get certain incentives from the city, and in return they might provide certain amenities to the neighborhood based on a private sort of negotiation with that neighborhood. So any last comments? I guess I'm going through this fast because I know it's almost 8 o'clock. Is it past? It's almost 8 o'clock. It's 10:02. And I promised I'd be out by 7:15. So we're a little bit past time.
7:59, but
7:15.
who's counting?
Oh, I thought you said 7:15.
No.
I got time. I got 9 minutes
You got plenty
still.
of time.
Any questions about housing? I still want to cover public health and climate resilience.
No, I have a couple things at the end of it I was hoping to go over, just to outline what I was hoping for action items, and then to discuss overall next steps and how we approach this, but.
Perfect. About housing specifically, or about all of them?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you, Joseph, too. I did note that you highlighted planning commission, especially in this area, jumped out at me as well. So one broader question I would have is, we're a little reactive in our position here. Things come to us. So this sort of speaks to me that we need to be a little more proactive about doing some work, as you have outlined here very capably here. And I don't think we want to lose sight of that. Our role, good comprehensive plan, where we take a deep dive, makes us, be introspective about what our role is and how we might be a little more proactive versus reactive. So
Sure.
it's a broader question. Leave it on the table.
Well, and that reflects, I think, the difference between planning and zoning. And the planning commission acts as a city zoning commission right now, so you see a lot of the zoning questions, land use approval requests, and then you recommend changes or approval or denial to the city council. So that's why a lot of what you're seeing is zoning related, is reactive.
Okay.
But this kind of thing, the planning part, we're creating plans, we're going out and doing community engagement and deciding where do we want to go with things. That's an opportunity for the planning commission to do more proactive activity. I mentioned, and also I'd say the committee work can be proactive. I also want to mention that we are doing an East Village subplan that we're going to get into next semester. I'm doing a couple meetings with stakeholders in the area. I guess, again, East Village is going to be the planning scope area for that will be like Bogue to Stoddard, east or west to east, and then the river past Grand River to Albert on the north. So that's kind of a focus area for that area, for that plan. And that's just revisiting a plan that was done in 2006, but we're going to start that over the next couple months. So if there are planning commissioners who are interested, particularly in being involved in that, let me know, and I'd love to involve you. Anything else about the housing section before I keep going?
Any other questions?
And we'll have a time for like sort of next steps wrap up at the end.
Great,
But
yeah,
if
I'm
there's
saving
housing
mine.
specific stuff that you want to talk about, this would be a great time. Keep going.
My comments are for the wrap up and next steps.
Okay. As far as public health go, essentially creating a built environment that promotes physical and mental well-being. Sometimes in planning we joke about, does the city make me look fat, right? And the way that you have your built environment can significantly affect your health. Is it easy to walk around or to recreate, to be active, or do you have to get in your car, or are there options to get on a bike, or for people who can't? Are they able to get on, move around in a chair, for example? Can we support public health through our built environment instead of making it worse? And so that's the whole goal. Can we decide which types of housing go where so that we can have housing close to your work or in a place where you can walk or bike or get on transit? Can we design streets for slower vehicle speed so it's safer for pedestrians and bicycles? Can we adjust our policies and procedures so that we're not making it more difficult to build the kinds of things that we want? So these are things that we're looking at as far as public health goes. What this shows is another result from our community engagement, which was saying the greener dots essentially are saying, where is this health promoting? Where are good health promoting opportunities? Where can I get to a park? Where can I walk easily or bike easily? And then the reddish ones are saying, where do I have problems? And so we saw some issues. We saw a lot of green on campus. We saw a lot of green around our parks and our trails. We saw some red around some bad intersections. I know that there were some concerns about trash in some areas, but essentially we didn't see any real surprises here. Busy intersections tend to be dangerous. I was surprised that we didn't see more reds, honestly, at Abbott and Saginaw, because that's a tough place to cross. Okay. As far as the goals and implementations, I wanted to show this graphic just because the social determinants of health, there are several determinants, but neighborhood and built environment is one of several. So the effect of the built environment on your health is what this chapter is all about. Especially because then we looked at the most frequent causes of death in the county, heart disease, you can impact by activity, malignant neoplasm or cancer, maybe not so much, but where you live and how you interact with the environment may. Accidents happen when you're walking and get hit by a car. For example, if we made it so that it was easier to walk without getting hit by a car, your health would be impacted quite positively. So we certainly want to create more opportunities for things like that. Chronic lower respiratory diseases, you can have a better breathing, a better ability to breathe if you walk and run a lot. So basically this is the idea, right, that what we do with our built environment can impact you and can potentially increase your longevity. I like that. So what we did with activities, reduce barriers to participation. What are the barriers to participation in active recreation? Improve walkability. A lot of these are going to be in DPW, Parks and Rec hands, public schools, safe routes, Seniors Commission, MSU, neighborhood associations. Improve sidewalks, crosswalks, and intersections. We've had that going on right now in front of Glencairn Elementary. There have been a lot of discussions about the crosswalk there and safety. Talk about increasing tree canopy. There's been some discussions among this group about when we've had questions about removing trees without a permit. This group has had to look at several of those requests over the last couple of years. Could we do something more proactively to help increase trees? Can we look at, the Green Code Study Committee was looking at different requirements for landscaping, for example. We look at narrowing roadways or adding protected bike lanes. Again, not super in the Planning Commission's wheelhouse, but certainly related. What are our ordinances that we have that are related to transportation standards? What can we change in our codes that will make our city a healthier place to live? Allowing for mixed-use development. This is where I'm coming back to the built environment. If you are closer to your health care, to your grocery stores, to your social activities, and you don't have to drive there, you might see some health impacts. An accessibility audit is a great activity that we should definitely be doing. Where essentially you get outside and you put a blindfold on or you sit down in a wheelchair and walk around or go around and say, oh my gosh, this is really hard. Now I'm understanding why it's much more difficult to get around East Lansing in a wheelchair, for example. And I'm not sure, I haven't done an accessibility audit here yet, so I'm not sure if it's bad to go around in a chair, but I certainly do notice when I'm walking and I trip on on a sidewalk corner or something like that, where can we be influencing our public space and our transportation network that's not vehicular, that can help increase health. Access to healthy nutrition. Yes, there was a question or a comment?
I think just a comment. As someone who walks around at least my neighborhood quite a bit, twice, 3 times every day, walking my dog, one thing that I actually notice that I think about a lot as far as walkability and accessibility is people often block the sidewalks with trash cans, with leaves, with snow. And so, I will move their trash cans into their driveway because I'm an awful person, I guess. But really, I'm just trying to think of neighbors who, don't have that ability and would have to walk into the street. It's really dangerous. And I don't know what we can do to sort of resolve that other than maybe an education campaign, or maybe that's a pace problem. But I see it a lot and it really worries me, I'm able-bodied, I can walk around it, but there's others with strollers or others with canes, walkers, crutches that can't.
I need to clarify, you said you're walking your dog 3 times a day?
Yes.
That's a high-maintenance dog, my goodness.
Oh, no, this is just something I brought with me from the city of Chicago, where you don't have a yard, you just walk your dog.
Sure, and are you kicking the cans into people's yards or just moving them?
I'm kindly moving them for the most part.
Sure.
And she's using her social equity lens. Thank
And
you
then I
very
come by
much.
later with a bag and pick them up and recycle them.
This is true.
That's my bad habit.
Well, and we certainly can. I mean, I think that would be an implementation step here, is to consider what can we change,
Yeah.
and how can we do it. or if we can't as planning commission, other commissions and boards can, and certainly council can. One thing we could look at would be a policy for sidewalk closures. When the sidewalk is closed, do we provide, what kind of alternatives do we provide? When a lane's closed, what happens, you know? So sometimes we'll see things where the sidewalk is just closed, and good luck, you gotta figure it out. Or are you just shunted onto the street? Do you have to cross, is there a crosswalk, is it safe? So we can look at policies like that, but that's an implementation step. That's a great comment though. Other comments or questions, thoughts? There was a comment earlier about grocery access, improving access to healthy nutrition, fresh produce. This was in the comprehensive plan as a priority. I want to mention that the students, here it is. The students said, hey, we support local food systems. There should be another commission, another city commission about food systems and food sustainability. I reflexively was like, oh no, another commission, just because we have about 30. But they're there for a reason. You know, if this is a high community priority, maybe we do consider a commission, or maybe we can adopt practices in our other existing boards and commissions that consider these kinds of questions. So what's the access to healthy nutrition? How do we support grocery stores or gardens or other uses that might be able to produce more healthy food? Similarly, how do we maintain and increase acreage of parks, access to recreation opportunities, sports, green spaces, et cetera? Parks and Rec has a very significant role in this, but Planning Commission certainly can as well. Just want to mention a couple more items from the students' report, that they were saying, let's try to address some gaps in off-campus transportation. They've noticed some gaps. They're thinking that they can fix those through information and rideshare programs, and mostly through MSU. But then they talked about pedestrian crosswalk and bike lane visibility, and they were speaking specifically about having more raised crosswalks, more crosswalks with beacons and signage, and protecting bike lanes so that you can bike without quite as much concern about cars. That's it for health. Any questions, comments about health before I can move on? Okay, because we just passed 7:59, but I'll still work on it. Just after 8 o'clock.
Deadline.
So as climate resilience goes, essentially saying, hey, how do we create an environmentally sustainable and resilient community? And the idea with the resilience is that as climate change impacts arrive, and we're seeing some, especially with say flooding, stormwater impacts from more frequent, more concentrated rainstorms, how can our community weather those better and be more resilient? So we can change that. We took a little different approach as far as the key questions and themes, and just saying, how can we weave this into our framework, kind of like we did for social equity? How can we weave this into housing? How can we have resilient housing? Can we have good housing, stable, affordable housing that can still be available even when there's an economic downturn? Can we have housing that accommodates different household sizes, ages, et cetera, protects vulnerable residents from displacement during neighborhood changes or disasters? That's certainly important. And then can we reduce transportation costs by having more location-efficient housing? So again, the idea is that you don't have to, if you're in a housing in the right location, you may not need to have a car to get to where you need to go. Also try to weave it in with public health. Can the healthcare infrastructure remain accessible during crises? Does our built environment promote physical and mental well-being? Clean air? Do we have networks that support communities during health emergencies or weather emergencies? Do we have equitable distribution of health resources and emergency response? So those like emergency response, climate disasters, weather emergencies, those are the things that the sustainability and climate chapters we're focusing on. And then how do we keep our green infrastructure in good place, in good shape? For example, how do we manage flooding? How do we manage high heat days? How do we have food insecurity? So these ideas, waste management, we talked about this a lot in Green Code Committee too. So we're trying to weave resiliency and climate resiliency into the other categories like we were for social equity. I just wanted to show the urban heat island that we saw. Essentially, we have some outliers, but generally you see the heat temperature is higher around business districts except we have a sod farm up at the northeast corner of the city that has some dark soil, and that tends to have some heat island effect. So that's sort of a little bit of an outlier seen up there. Otherwise, the heat is generally higher, the temperature is higher in the city around business districts where there's less green space and less water. Excuse me. So as far as implementation activities, resilience plan, that's underway right now. We have the wet weather resilience plan that's being worked on, developed by the DPW crew. And I think that's still going to be in process until mid-2026. Can we look at policy updates to reduce greenhouse gas emissions or stormwater runoff or fire or wind damage? That's been an activity of the Green Code Study Committee, but we also see that Commission on Environment will be doing that a lot, City Council, and we have partners in Eagle and MSU as well. Prioritizing redevelopment along transit corridors, you're starting to get a theme that if you have mixed-use compact development that's walkable, you can use your legs, you can use bikes, you can use transit. These can have significant and concrete environmental impacts just because you have the alternative and you have the ability to not have to get in your car if you don't want to. And that can get people off the road and make it a lot easier for the people who do want to drive still. So there are a lot of benefits to be able to sort of change your land use development patterns that can go well beyond just boy, I just completely lost my train of thought. So let's forget that. Zoning updates to increase housing supply and type, walkability, mixed use, while identifying resiliency opportunities. I would say this is very similar to the previous point, but essentially saying, can we have more density? Can we have this long bus routes? Do we need to use impervious surfaces all the time? Can we allow for pervious pavement? Can we increase our landscaping, for example? How can we have higher climate resiliency based on our zoning ordinance? Improved communication for opportunities within the home. Not too much is going to be, that's going to be largely like communications and council policies. Also increased use of solar and renewables for residential and small business. I would say that where we can have an impact as Planning Commission is to allow it in our zoning ordinance. We've made some changes recently, in fact, to allow solar to be more easily adopted. Educate and prototype. Household resilience strategies, again, that's kind of similar to implementation 5, where we're talking about communication of opportunities for homeowners. I would say that's more with utilities, with MSU, with our communications division. Reducing energy consumption is a constant consideration for municipal facilities, for City Hall, for this building, for our wastewater treatment plant, for some of our bigger operations like that. And that's on the mind of our council and manager and DPW for sure. Expanding and improving our bicycle infrastructure and expanding bike lanes and bike safety. Not too much with this commission unless you want to advocate for it. We do have a non-motorized transportation plan that DPW has traditionally kind of led. We can always adjust that if needed. Bike and driver safety education and enforcement, I would say along the same lines, but not central to this planning commission. Planting more trees and managing our forests and green space, that's a big priority for DPW and parks, and then also fostering and incentivizing native plant use or pollinator lawns or pollinator gardens. This group could have some impact on that as well, again, by sort of allowing it. And we can modify our zoning ordinance standards for landscaping and what the property needs to look like, and allow those sort of plants. Finally, conserving the Red Cedar River. Not too much from the Planning Commission, but that was a priority within the comprehensive plan. Waste diversion, DPW is working on this right now. Green Code Study Committee was working on that. How do we increase recycling, especially among larger multifamily facilities, for example. And then considering our dynamic stormwater runoff management approach. And Green Code worked on this a lot. So we'll be bringing some stormwater runoff management policy changes, potential policy changes to the City Council for discussion in December. And then hopefully action shortly thereafter. Okay. That wraps up the whole implementation aspect or section. Just wanted to show you real quick the zoning plan. I mentioned that earlier, where we're sort of tracking how do future land use categories match our compatible zoning districts. We noticed that we didn't use all of our zoning districts, and so that's a good good opportunity to say, do we need all of these? Should we adjust them? And that is certainly something that I want to look into over the next year or so. So next steps, I just sort of wrote down, just summarized all the different implementation categories in each section and sort of what's currently happening. We have a lot more going on in housing. Housing is a pretty high priority area for the city right now. So things are happening. In fact, I sort of put these out as far as like, I organized these slides differently. The next two look different. I'm trying to do chronologically, like these are what's currently underway, what's coming up very quickly, what's ongoing, what do I see coming up in 2026. The ones further down the list, like change in the zone district, taking a hard look at the form-based code. I don't think those will happen immediately. I think those are going to be a little bit more midterm, long-term actions. As far as health, I just kind of reiterated what the different steps are, I think.
Those are the goals on the side, for example, pH.
Yeah, this is just the number that it corresponds to.
In the plan,
Mhm.
okay.
And then same thing with climate resilience. So
curious.
just kind of summarizing them and then how do
Going
they
back
fit?
to the housing,
Yep.
I didn't see the ADU on there. I just wondered, since we changed the zoning, has anyone used that?
We haven't changed the zoning.
Oh, we haven't, okay. I thought
Not for
we allowed
ADUs. There's been some discussion. We brought the minor zoning amendments that talked about the terminology about ADUs. They were called accessory apartments in some places, accessory dwelling units in others. But as far as like an actual policy change to allow them in more places, that didn't go through. So I think that could be a low-hanging fruit. And it could be something that we can move on sooner if the planning commission wants to. I would say that kind of thing, the more proactive advocacy role, could be the planning commission discussing and then say, council, we think this is a high priority and we want you to look into this more. Direct us to take some action. Because council really sets the direction, I guess, but you certainly have an influence. I think that's what I have. Yep, look at that. Almost 7:59. Just looking for discussions, questions, thoughts, concerns, ideas, or wrap up thoughts if you have them. But I'm happy to go back through any slide if you'd like, or we can talk about other things.
Any comments or questions before I go?
Yeah, you go ahead. I mean, I do have some things, and I'm betting you and I are on the same
I'm
page,
just
so
upset
please go.
Landon stole my thunder because those last few slides were pretty much exactly what I was going to talk about, so.
I made them just for you.
Wasted all my time writing notes.
Well, that's
See,
a-
we're
I
on the
call it a healthy
same
plan,
wavelength.
man.
I thought, I bet Mr. Chair wants me to
Yeah, so,
summarize.
you know, I think it's, discussing the next steps is important, and I think as far as discussing those, like what's a realistic timeline from a capacity perspective, because this is a ton of work, right? And I think trying to find a way to prioritize some of these and have reasonable, deliverable expectations is key for us. And I think part of that too is trying to deviate away from litigating what's in the plan and focusing on what we can do going forward, potentially with a little discussion on how we redo the master plan next time, whether we can potentially partner with MSU or other entities to do it. And I learned a lot throughout that process, and it was, I think, a really engaging process. But as far as what's in our lane, because not all this really is, as you pointed out, I think I'm particularly interested in the future land use map and streamlining some of those zoning codes. I think some of it's just unnecessarily confusing and or restrictive, so I think that's a good long-term goal for this group. I think focusing on reducing some of the bureaucratic hurdles with the development process, empowering staff to make some of the more low-hanging fruit, simpler administrative decisions, I think is just a common sense, quick thing we should focus on at the earliest possible step of this. The form-based code, you know, I know Cynthia is not here, neither is former Chair Bowman, but and Commissioner Wolf, they put a tremendous amount of work into that process, as did the rest of the commission. And ideally, I'd like to start from where they left off, have a staff level review of that, and that's what we get is potentially like a overview of what was completed at the end of that process, and potentially with new staff in place, where do they recommend taking a closer look at maybe modernizing some of those things, because I think it's been, what, 6 years or something like that since that was completed. And then ADUs, I think, is another good, hopefully, simple ordinance, because other communities have something there in place, and that's what I'm particularly interested in, and I think a lot of the rest of it sounds great too, but that's just a lot. Like when you see it, like 12 objectives just focusing on housing on one slide, it's,
Right.
I want to be kind to you guys as well, so, but that's what I'm interested in, so.
Sure.
Love to hear what
Well,
the
because
rest of the
it's
commissioners
a
think.
good work plan. I guess along those lines, I think that the future land use sort of consideration, the categories, and then consideration of should we change the map, is something we could do fairly soon with our current capacity. I think that the form-based code, that would be something that we certainly could bring back to the to the commission and say, here's this was what was developed a few years ago. What really sticks out to you, like you're saying, Mr. Chair, sort of a consideration of that code, and should we move forward, or if so, how? I think that there are a lot of changes that we can make to our zoning districts right now. We have a lot of them. The categories of the districts that we have right now may not make sense that they did when they were created. And maybe the form-based code is the way to go, or maybe it's not. So I think that looking at that, and the zone districts across the board is a great exercise. I tend to look at that with a little more wariness than I do with the planning process. The master plan is a nice document that people smile about and think, this was great, I wanted to think about what we want and how we want to get there. When you change the zoning ordinance, that's actually changing how you're going to get there, and that's where the controversy comes up in the contention. So I think that's coming, that needs to come. I'm not quite sure the timeline. And as far as ADUs go, I think that there certainly is some energy. We get inquiries about ADUs all the time, and I think that there's a lot of interest in the community from that, but I'm not sure where the current council or the new council is going to come down on that. But I think if there's interest among our commission, we should certainly look at considering changes sooner than later. Thank you for those comments. There are others?
A couple quick, go ahead, Chuck.
So, I recognize this suggestion may require additional work, but I appreciate the next steps that have been outlined here. Is there any way that this can be converted into a scorecard? It feels like a whole mass of data and information, and A needs to be done and B needs to be done, and I'm trying to fit them all together. So a scorecard I would find really helpful, and I recognize that would require additional work on your and your staff's part.
I think that's a great idea. I'd like to connect with you to understand your vision more, because I think it would be a useful tool for this commission and also our council.
Actually,
It's a
to
great
that
idea.
point, maybe we ought to just put this on the agenda every other meeting, a little update.
Just something to run back through the whole plan? Yeah.
Well, no.
I'm kidding.
No, I know that. So, but I mean, I just don't want to, I think this is a great document. And, you know, to Chuck's point, you know, we've got to consolidate it some way, somehow. But I just don't want to lose sight of this. So many of these get put on the shelf and we sort of forget about them. I think to have this on the agenda, Chair, I'm sorry, I'm kind of in your turf here a little bit, but to put it on the agenda for, on a regular basis, a little comprehensive plan update. And however that goes, you know, I think that might be a good idea. Yeah, a couple quick things. First of all, it's a really great document. Love the social equity piece. So if someone says to us, well, we'll solve the affordable housing problem when the interest rates fall, we've solved the equality issue, but not the equity issue. So we don't buy that logic. All right, we keep plugging away on social equity. Like that lens, I think it's really well stated here. I think this affordable housing issue is going to be on a comprehensive plan forever. It's not going away. And I think it's, you may not like this, I think it's more a regional problem than it is a city of East Lansing problem. I think we're a big player in resolving that, but I think, as you said early on, you reached out so well to MSU, Clinton County, Eaton County, Ingham County, there's so many other municipalities that need to be part of that solution. And I think we need to, if we're really gonna solve it, I think we just need to think broader. And I know it's outside of our guardrails, if you will, but at some level, we need to, if we're really gonna solve that problem, we need to think bigger. And we need to get more people, more municipalities involved in that decision. So just a real quick little, small, I went macro, I'm gonna go micro. So there's some language on page 7. Students were concerned about limited access to affordable and healthy food options in the city. And that sort of surfaced a couple of times. So if we hypothetically have a new restaurant/gas station proposing to land in the city of East Lansing, it seems to me that's a logical read from the comprehensive plan. Talk about the food that you're going to make available to the surrounding community. So it gets to a bigger question about how we want to implement, how we want to integrate this into questions that come our way. I'm inclined to do that. I guess I'd kind of like to hear from the commission. Do we really want to quote this and give this some traction in public comment or in public hearings? I think that would be well worthwhile. I think that's a fair question to ask, as well as, can you redesign your parking lot so there's less, or there's less, get my word right, less impervious and more landscaping around that spot, because that's a priority for our community. This is important to us, and we want to make sure that those in front of us hear that. So I'm sort of inclined to use it in that way, but I don't want to get away from what the thinking here of my fellow commissioners are. So I just put that out there.
I think it's a good point, and I've always used the city's comprehensive master plan as my guiding principle in making policy decisions, and I think that example you cited is potentially a good example of where a couple different values and objectives come into conflict, and how do you deliberate those and determine what's best, I think is just on a case-by-case basis. But there's oftentimes where I'll go back and look at what the future land use recommendation was for an area and some of the changes that are outlined here. And that's what it's for. It's just a resource to help guide you in your decision-making and hopefully steer the planning commission towards some of these objectives.
At the same time, I think this is written in such a way that if we're going to have a commission, we're going to have public hearings, we're going to have to use our judgment at some level. So we incorporate this into a broader thought process that will help us get to reasonable decisions that reflect the values of the city of East Lansing as pulled together here. I'm just sort of speaking out loud, trying to connect with the commission here. All right, good.
Yeah.
Hey, great job. I mean, I think you did a really nice job. It was good to spend some time with it this afternoon and hear you and so on. So, good job. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I don't think any of us want to be replaced by AI, so.
Oh, my gosh. Same here.
So, that's why we're here. So,
True that.
okay. Any other comments or questions before we wrap up tonight? Landon, do you need any other guidance from us?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll stay in touch.
We will.
All right. Seeing as there's no comments, that takes us on to item number 9, commissioner concerns. Any concerns from commissioners? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Putz,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Sobolewski. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor vote aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We're adjourned at 8:25 PM.
Okay.
Exactly 26 minutes later than he said we would be.
I was thinking 8:30 all along, man. I was surprised.